Hope Logan had always believed that purpose was something a person nurtured, something cultivated through devotion and sincerity, something that grew only when tended with both heart and ambition. Yet over the past year, she had found herself slowly suffocating beneath the polished surface of Forrester Creations. The place that once felt like home now resembled a gilded cage, and every corridor seemed to echo with expectations she could no longer meet, dreams she could no longer claim as her own, and shadows of people who always seemed to shine brighter, louder, and more effortlessly than she ever could. Hope had not realized when admiration turned into invisibility, or when dedication transformed into stagnation. All she knew was that day after day, she walked into Forrester Creations carrying a weight no one else appeared to notice. There had been a time when hope for the future was celebrated as her triumph of vision that proved her identity mattered in a world dominated by legacy and hierarchy. But gradually, she began feeling like a placeholder inside her own brand, overshadowed by decisions made above her, discussions held without her, and a subtle but persistent message that she was no longer irreplaceable. Hope tried to ignore the small cuts, the quiet dismissals, the slight changes that chipped away at her confidence. She encouraged herself to believe she was imagining it, that work was simply stressful, that everyone experienced seasons of feeling undervalued. Yet the truth lingered in the corners of every meeting. She was being treated as though she had reached her limit, as though her vision had stalled, as though the world had moved forward without her. Hope's disappointment grew slowly but steadily, turning into a quiet ache lodged deep within her. Every time Rich praised Thomas's sketches with a fervor he rarely reserved for her. Every time Steffi authorized adjustments to her line without consulting her. Every time Brooke reminded her to be patient because these things work in cycles. Every moment that diminished her voice carved deeper into her sense of self, into the belief she had once carried proudly, that she was a designer capable of building something meaningful on her own. The ache swelled into something larger the day Katie Logan approached her. Katie had been riding a current of transformation, emerging from the ashes of the Logan trademark war with new ambition, new direction, and new power. Bill Spencer, in a grand gesture of support, gifted her a fashion company modern, well-funded, hungry for innovation. The gift came with an unspoken promise. Katie would no longer be the woman overshadowed by others, the sister who played peacekeeper, the woman who quietly disappeared into the margins of family and professional battles. This company would be hers to shape, hers to command, hers to build into a legacy rivaling even Forrester Creations. But Katie did not want to build the empire alone. She wanted Hope at her side. Hope had always admired Katie. There was something steady and genuine about her, something reassuring, something fiercely loyal yet unafraid to challenge the world. When Katie invited Hope to a private meeting, she did not anticipate what was coming. She expected advice, comfort, maybe quiet understanding. Instead, she found an opportunity that struck like lightning. Katie offered her the position of creative director, complete artistic control, complete freedom, complete independence. Hope's heart twisted violently at the offer. It was everything Forrester had slowly begun stripping from her. It was validation. It was rebirth. It was a chance to create without being overshadowed, corrected, or controlled. But it was also dangerous, emotional, risky, and deeply, deeply complicated. The decision carved itself into her mind with brutal sharpness. If she stayed at Forrester Creations, she would remain trapped in a system that no longer believed in her. If she left, she would betray the company that raised her career from infancy. She would ignite conflict within the Logan family. She would set herself against Steffi, Thomas, Ridge, and likely even her mother. She would be stepping into a battlefield she had never imagined entering. Hope spent long nights battling herself, questioning her intentions. Was she simply running away? Or was she fighting for a version of herself she had neglected for years? The question weighed on her until her decision finally rose with clarity so powerful she could not deny it. Hope Logan would leave Forrester Creations. The announcement struck the industry like a violent tremor. For many, Hope had been the heart of the brand, of fusion of idealism, compassion, and modern femininity. Her design spoke to women who sought softness without weakness, grace without fragility. To lose her meant losing the soul of an entire division. And the fact that she left voluntarily abruptly without a scandal to push her out, without a demotion forcing her hand, was shocking in its own right. But what came next was even more shocking. Hope did not simply leave hope for the future. She dissolved it. She walked away from the line she had built from the ashes of her own heartbreaks, poured her identity into, nurtured through challenges and triumphs, crafted into a symbol of her values. She released ownership, relinquishing every thread, every dress, every creative decision she had ever made. She left it behind like an old version of herself that no longer served her. It was an act both mournful and liberating. Her departure fractured the Logan sisters in ways none of them expected. Brooke was blindsided, unable to understand how her daughter could abandon the family's fashion legacy. She insisted that Hope was being manipulated, swayed by insecurity, blinded by temporary emotion. She blamed Katie. She blamed Bill. She blamed the chaos surrounding Forrester. Brooke could not accept that Hope had chosen power, independence, self-respect. To Brooke, Hope's decision felt like betrayal. Katie, on the other hand, felt pride tinged with guilt. She knew her offer had triggered this earthquake. She wanted Hope beside her not as a pawn, not as a symbol, but as a partner. But as the rift deepened between the sisters, Katie began to wonder whether she had underestimated the consequences. The Logan name had survived affairs, scandals, rivalries, even marriages that imploded. But a business war was different. It had sharper teeth, deeper wounds, higher stakes. Ridge watched the unfolding drama with quiet frustration. He had never fully understood Hope as a designer, but he respected her dedication. Her departure stung not because he valued her creatively as highly as others did, but because she represented stability, continuity, and a connection to Brooke that had always grounded the Forrester world. Losing her meant losing something symbolic, something emotional. And seeing Brooke spiral into confusion and defensiveness only made the loss heavier. The fashion world erupted into speculation. Could Katie's company rival Forrester Creations? Could Hope stand alone without the Forrester machine behind her? Was this a revenge play? A strategic takeover? A family implosion about to reshape the industry? Within weeks, the whispers intensified as Hope unveiled her first project under Katie's leadership. A new line, a new vision, a new evolution of who she was as an artist. Gone were the soft, romantic silhouettes of her early work. Gone were the idealistic themes that once defined her. This new collection was daring, assertive, emotionally charged, reflecting the inner upheaval she had survived. Hope poured her transformation into every design, stitching her liberation into each hem, each seam, each provocative detail. The runway buzzed with electricity. Forrester Creations felt the shift like a gust of cold wind across its foundation. Steffi reacted first. She saw the threat for what it truly was, not a rebellion born from hurt feelings, but a challenge to Forrester's dominance. A direct strike. A declaration of independence. She demanded meetings, strategy sessions, marketing overhauls. She pushed Thomas to elevate his creativity. She urged Ridge to remain vigilant. The family had faced rivals before, but never from within the Logan bloodline. Brooke was caught in emotional chaos, torn between maternal pride and wounded ego. Each headline praising Hope felt like a blade twisting between her ribs. She had always wanted the world for her daughter, but not like this. Not in defiance. Not in separation. Not at the cost of their family unity. Brooke began oscillating between tears and outrage, unable to decide whether to support Hope or pull her back into the fold by force. But Hope stood firm. She did not apologize. She did not waver. She did not look back. Katie remained by her side, guiding, encouraging, sharing the burden of leadership. Together, they built something fresh, something disruptive, something unmistakably Logan yet free from the chains of legacy. And then came the showdown. Hope's new collection was scheduled to debut in Milan the same week Forrester Creations planned to unveil their own line. The industry sensed the tension and magnified it. Articles compared sketches. Journalists speculated narratives. Designers whispered in corners, weighing which show they believed would dominate. The night of the dual fashion shows felt like standing at the center of a brewing storm. At Forrester's event, the energy was sharp and defensive. Every model, every garment, every decision clung to the unspoken pressure to outperform Hope. Thomas's designs were stunning, and Ridge's direction was strong, but the shadow of Hope lingered like a ghost. Meanwhile, in Milan, the air crackled with anticipation as Hope prepared to debut her vision. She stood behind the curtain, her hands trembling slightly not from fear, but from the sensation of stepping into a new life. Katie placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, silently acknowledging everything this moment meant. When the lights dimmed and the first model stepped onto the runway, the crowd erupted. The designs were breathtaking, bold, defiant, deeply emotional. Each garment told a story Hope had been too afraid to speak before. Stories of being underestimated, dismissed, overshadowed. Stories of breaking free. The fashion world was not merely impressed. It was transformed. Forrester's show had been beautiful. Hope's show was unforgettable. And this began the real war. Industry insiders called it the Logan Divide. A battle of creativity. A war of identity. A rift threatening to rip two families apart. Hope versus Steffi. Hope versus Ridge. Hope versus Brooke. Hope versus Forrester Creations. And deeper still, Katie versus Brooke. Katie versus the Logan legacy itself. The world watched, hungry for more. Families fractured. Alliances shifted. The battlefield of fashion became the battlefield of blood. And at the center of it all stood Hope Logan, no longer the gentle dreamer, no longer the girl seeking approval, no longer the soft heart of a chaotic dynasty. She had become something else entirely. A force, a rival, a creator reborn from fire. The aftermath of Hope's triumphant show in Milan rippled across the fashion world with a force that caught even her by surprise. Overnight, she became the symbol of creative rebellion, a woman who dared to walk away from an empire and build another from nothing but conviction and pain. Critics hailed her collection as the most powerful debut of the decade, calling it raw, honest, and achingly human. The press labeled her the designer who broke free, a title that both thrilled and frightened Hope. She had wanted recognition, yes, but she had never imagined what it would feel like when the world finally saw her. The light that now shone on her, however, burned brighter than she expected. It illuminated her triumph, but it also cast long, jagged shadows behind her, shadows filled with resentment, wounded egos, and family loyalty stretched thin enough to snap. As her name skyrocketed in the industry, the tension within the Logan and Forrester families evolved into something darker, more personal, a storm gathering at the horizon of every conversation, every decision, every press release. At Forrester Creations, the mood shifted from pride to unease. Designers whispered in hallways. Executives analyzed numbers that suddenly felt fragile. The board compared projections, quietly acknowledging that Hope's rising influence could not be ignored. Steffi, who had always held herself with confidence carved from years of survival, felt her certainty begin to crack. She saw not just competition, but a threat to the empire she had fought to defend through betrayal, heartbreak, and relentless pressure. Hope's independence felt like a challenge to her authority, a challenge she could not afford to take lightly. Every headline praising Hope felt like a criticism of her leadership. Every article questioning Forrester's staying power felt like a bruise forming beneath her skin. Rich felt the tension swirling around him like smoke. He had been a soldier in countless fashion battles, but this one cut deeper than fabric, deeper than art, deeper than legacy. The war was not between companies. It was between family members he loved, bound by blood but divided by ambition. Rich had watched Hope grow from a gentle, idealistic girl into a woman shaped by heartbreak and determination. He admired her spirit, even if he did not always understand it. Yet seeing her rise outside the Forrester walls felt like betrayal, not because she left, but because she left with such blazing brilliance that it cast doubt on his own decisions. Ridge had always believed he knew where talent belonged. Hope's departure proved he had underestimated her. But Brooke suffered the most internal damage. She tried to hide it, tried to smile, tried to be supportive, tried to act like she understood, but the truth cut her deeper than anyone realized. Hope's independence was not simply a creative shift. It was a rupture in the mother-daughter bond she believed unbreakable. Brooke had always seen Hope as an extension of her own dreams and ideals. They had built hope for the future together, fought for it together, faced scandals and heartbreak with each other's hands to hold. To watch her daughter walk away so decisively without seeking permission, without asking guidance, without looking back felt like emotional abandonment. Brooke told herself she was proud. Brooke told the world Hope was brave. But in the silence of her own room, she felt discarded. She feared losing her daughter in the same way she had lost so many relationships in her life, slowly, painfully, through quiet, avoidable misunderstandings. And the more Hope succeeded, the more distant Brooke felt from the woman she had raised. Yet even Brooke, in her grief, could not ignore the strength radiating from her daughter. It reminded her of her own rise decades earlier. It terrified her and fascinated her in equal measure. Meanwhile, Hope poured herself into her new brand with the all-consuming passion of someone who had discovered a new reason to breathe. Every morning she arrived before the lights in the building switched on. Every night she left long after the sun dipped below the skyline. She pushed boundaries she had never dared push at Forrester. She experimented with unconventional fabrics, designs that challenged tradition, silhouettes that frightened investors but thrilled her soul. She had finally found the freedom she never knew she needed. Yet ambition carried its own loneliness. In moments between designing and strategizing, she felt pangs of grief for what she had left behind. Flashbacks of the Forrester sewing rooms, the camaraderie with the staff, even heated creative debates all resurfaced like ghosts trying to reclaim her. She missed the familiarity. She missed the comfort of legacy. She missed the version of herself she had been before she realized she was undervalued. But she knew going back was impossible. She had crossed a threshold, and crossing it had rewritten her. Katie watched Hope evolve with both admiration and concern. She had offered Hope a lifeline, but now she worried the weight of responsibility might consume her. Hope's brilliance was undeniable, but so was the emotional toll of leading a global brand. Katie herself felt the pressure to balancing strategy, protecting her niece, defending their company from corporate giants, and navigating the emotional fallout with Brooke. She had never wanted a war with her sister. She only wanted Hope to have the freedom she deserved. But the industry thrived on conflict, and the media turned the Logan divide into an irresistible narrative. Every headline became a weapon. Every review became ammunition. Every sales report became a battlefield. And the wounds deepened further when Forrester Creations prepared their next major show, one designs specifically to counter Hope's rising influence. It was no longer about art. It was no longer about fashion. It was about supremacy. Hope felt the pressure intensify as the date approached. She sensed the world waiting for her next move, holding its breath to see whether her first success had been a miracle or the beginning of a new dynasty. She sensed Katie's anxiety. She sensed the Forrester family tightening into defensive formation. She sensed Brooke's heartbreak hardening into a silent, aching storm. But she also sensed something else, something she had never felt so strongly before. Belief in herself, in her voice, in her artistry. For the first time in her life, Hope Logan was not creating to please anyone. She was creating to express something fierce inside her, something that had waited years to emerge. Her new collection reflected that inner transformation, pieces structured like armor, silhouettes blooming like scars turning into beauty, textures inspired by the duality of softness and power. She was designing not dresses, but metaphors. On the day of her second major show, Hope stood backstage, watching models prepare with quiet intensity. Her heart raced not with fear, but with anticipation. She thought of her past, her mistakes, her triumphs, her heartbreaks, her rebirth. And she knew she had never been more ready for anything. But across town, Forrester Creations was preparing its own counterattack, led by a creative team determined to reclaim dominance. Thomas poured rage into his designs. Steffi fueled the narrative of a damaged family. Rich sharpened every detail with the precision of a man fighting to defend a legacy. The world braced for collision. As the runway lights flared to life and Hope Show began, she stepped into the shadows behind the curtain and closed her eyes. She let the music flow through her, let the energy of the room wash over her, let the moment carry her beyond fear. The models stepped forward like warriors, wearing her story, bearing her transformation. The audience reacted with stunned silence followed by applause so thunderous it vibrated through Hope's bones. She had done it again. But this time, the triumph came with a deeper consequential realization that she had cemented herself not as a former Forrester designer, not as a Logan chasing acceptance, but as a force capable of reshaping the fashion landscape entirely. And the victory carried a cost. Backstage, after the applause faded, she saw her mother standing alone in the corner of the room. Brooke's eyes were full of pride, but also sorrow and ache that could not be masked by makeup or elegance. Hope felt her throat tighten. For the first time since leaving Forrester, she understood that her success might have broken something fragile between them. And that fracture was only beginning. Because while the runway celebrated her rise, the families she loved were breaking beneath the weight of competition. The Logan sisters, the Forrester empire, the generations of love, betrayal, jealousy, and loyalty intertwined between them. The battle lines had been drawn, and Hope Logan, whether she wanted it or not, was now at the center of a war fierce enough to reshape everything they once held sacred.